What's up, guys? Welcome to this very special episode of the Sat Signal. Today, we have something really different for you. We have the rare opportunity to sit down with somebody from a whole different area of the Bitcoin world. I sit down today with Will Wright, a young Australian entrepreneur who owns MiningStore.com.au. He's one of the leaders in the space helping people mine Bitcoin. We went into the nitty-gritty financials of whether it's better just to buy Bitcoin or actually invest in Bitcoin miners and have what's known as virgin Bitcoin turning up passively 24/7 into your nominated Bitcoin wallet. He is an incredibly smart and direct young man, very transparent. We also go deep on how Bitcoin mining works and why it is such a powerful aspect of the Bitcoin story. Guys, as always, if you enjoy this content, make sure you drop a comment and a like. Myself and Will are going to read them all. And if you want to do business with these guys, click on the link below the video. They're awesome people. Some of my friends in my Bitcoin network are already clients and rave about them. I know you're going to actually love this one. It is very different to what we normally do, and it's super interesting right to the end. With that said, let's get into it. Will, welcome to the Sat Signal. Awesome to have you with us, mate. Another Aussie Bitcoiner. But you're quite different to anyone else we've had on the show because you guys play in the Bitcoin mining space. So Will, tell us a little bit about your company, MiningStore.com.au. How did you guys come to be? What's the backstory?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Thanks for having me on the show, Adam. Look, it all started back in 2014. My best mate, Cal, from school, we were a bit into the gaming, and during uni, we had our desktop computers that we were gaming on and learned online that you could mine Bitcoin, whilst you weren't using the computer. So it wasn't worth much back then. It was just a bit of fun. And, when 2016, 2017 came around, we're looking at these Bitcoin that we mine. We're like, shit, they're going up from a couple of thousand to $10,000 to $20,000 a coin. And we're like, we've got a bit of something going on here. So, we were scaling our mining throughout that process. And yeah, around 2017, we both left our day jobs, launched MiningStore. Fast forward to today, we're hosting about $60 million worth of Bitcoin miners. And that's really how we've set ourselves up really for our financial future is through the Bitcoin mining.
That's incredible. So for somebody who knows nothing about Bitcoin mining, like when people think of mining, they think of picks and shovels, they think of gold, and there's quite a lot of crossover actually between the fact you have to mine for gold, you have to prove work, you have to go in and dig a hole and get it out. So what is Bitcoin mining like for a new person who doesn't really understand what Bitcoin mining is? What is it?
Yeah, you could probably, from your own insights of getting into the world of crypto, you kind of have these light bulb moments as time goes on and the deeper you get in the rabbit hole. But from a very basic point of view, I really like to compare Bitcoin mining to, something in the traditional world, which would be the banking system. So the role of a Bitcoin miner is really similar to the role of a bank teller at a bank. You go into the bank, you give them $1,000 to put into mum and dad's account. The bank teller processes the transaction, and in return, they're getting paid a wage for doing that. So that's essentially what a Bitcoin miner is doing. It's actually processing all of the transactions on the Bitcoin network, and in return, it's getting paid a reward for doing that. So that's the most basic way that I can explain it, and no doubt we'll get into more complex and different strategies and things like that as this show goes on. But that's kind of the role of a Bitcoin miner and how it works.
Right. And so these days, anybody can be a Bitcoin miner, right? Like, so how do you get into the business of mining and how do you get rewarded?
Yeah, good question. So I would say the thing with Bitcoin mining is there's this common misunderstanding that it's really complicated and it's hard to get into. When we got into it, as I said, like we literally just downloaded a program on our normal computer and you can start processing transactions on the Bitcoin network and getting paid for it. Now today, and if you want to do things as an investment, it's not just a hobby. The simple process is you're buying an ASIC miner. It's about this big. It's a computer specifically built to mine Bitcoin. You plug it into the wall and it basically processes transactions on the network and pays Bitcoin to your wallet. Now, obviously, if you're doing it as an investment, you wouldn't plug that machine and have it run at home. You use a hosting facility. And that's when I say at the start, we're now hosting $60 million worth of miners for clients. That's how clients are doing it. So they would simply just say, yep, I want 5 more machines. We get them shipped from China to our hosting facilities, which are either in USA, Ethiopia, China, wherever they may be. And they get plugged in at the hosting facility. We get the Bitcoin wallet address. Our client puts that into their mining pool, and every single day, Bitcoin's just passively going into their account.
So interesting. So it's really, where you fit in, and when you're dealing with clients, you're really talking to investors, right? People who want to allocate money to buy these computers from you, these specialized computers, which when you plug them in, they start verifying transactions on the Bitcoin network and earning Bitcoin as a reward, which goes directly into a Bitcoin wallet that they provide you when they buy the machines. That's basically it.
Yeah, spot on. You hit the nail on the head. We traditionally, I'm in Bitcoin to make money. I'm not just someone that's like an IT guy and loves it. Like I do now. I've been in the industry for over 10 years now. I have a passion for it, and I love DeFi or decentralized finance compared to the traditional financial world. I see a lot of benefit in it, but at its core, we're in this to make money. We're in it as an investment. So yeah, you're spot on exactly with that process. It's an incredibly passive way to accumulate Bitcoin. If you believe in Bitcoin long term, you're not going to be disappointed with the amount of Bitcoin you're just passively accumulating. And that's the kind of target market that we're helping. People who just want to accumulate as much Bitcoin and don't want to have to look at the charts and go, is today a good time to buy, or should I be selling some out? It's just a long-term passive accumulation.
That's interesting. So it's like the ultimate dollar cost averaging, DCAing. You've invested this money into these computers, and it just keeps churning out little bits of Bitcoin Satoshis into your wallet. Now, I guess the obvious question is, how does it compare to just buying Bitcoin at the market relative? Because I imagine you've got an upfront cost of the hardware, and then you're going to send us a bill also once a month for the running costs of the machine as well, because there's significant energy costs. Is that sort of how it works? And then hopefully between the two, it works out to around the same price as what you could buy Bitcoin for. Is that sort of how it works, or do you get it cheaper? Or
yeah, I suppose like the biggest question people always ask, like when you're thinking about the numbers, is am I better off just buying Bitcoin at today's price, or am I better off buying the Bitcoin mining machine and mining it over time? I can share screen. I've got some charts that make it a lot easier. I'm a visual learner myself. I think a lot of people these days are. So I'll go over and share screen here. But these charts.
Yeah, so I was going to say, let's get into the charts in a minute. I think before jumping into the charts, I'd really like to just help people better understand like the importance of that role. Like, what creates the demand for the mine? So is it trying to mine Bitcoin, or is it just verifying transactions that are happening on the Bitcoin network, or are they one and the same thing? Like, can you just sort of get into that detail for us?
100%. So let's go back to when Bitcoin first originated, right? There was 21 million Bitcoin just sitting in a treasury, okay? And in 2009, I think it was 2008, the first Bitcoin was mined, and every 10 minutes after, a block is mined, okay?
I want you to listen very carefully and mark this date in your calendar right now. Next week, October 9th at 7 p.m. Brisbane time, we're doing a free live webinar at the Unemployable headquarters here on the Gold Coast. It's called Ask Us Anything, where we're taking all your property development questions and we're going to be answering them live that night. If you're interested, click in the episode description down below, or go to www.unemployableproperty.com.au/ask us anything. We will be going live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And for anyone that is there that night live on the webinar, we're going to be doing a draw for 2 tickets to our upcoming Unemployable boat cruise on November 29th, where you're going to be hanging out with our consultants and all of our Unemployable coaching clients. There will be over 100 people on this boat. It's going to be a great afternoon, but you have to be there live on the webinar that night. We hope to see you that night, and hopefully we'll see you on the boat as well.
Now, every time a block is mined and all the transactions are updated, there's a reward that comes out of that treasury. All right. So originally all the 21 million was sitting in treasury. Every 10 minutes, back in that day, it was 50 Bitcoin rewarded to the Bitcoin miner that solved the block. So there'd be a handsome return at today's price, but back then it wasn't so much, right? And so essentially what's happening is over time, every 4 years, that block reward halves, okay? And so it's getting harder and harder to mine the Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's price is going up. So right now, today, there's only about 6% of the Bitcoin left to mine, okay? And it's going to take like another 120, 30, 40 years to mine the last portion of that Bitcoin. But there's two pieces of reward that come from Bitcoin mining. So everyone always says, well, what happens when there's no Bitcoin left to mine? Like, how do the Bitcoin miners make a reward? Well, the other half of the reward comes from all the transaction fees that happen in that block. And it's getting closer to the point where the transaction fees are actually making up a larger portion. They're not larger, like the block reward now at 3.25 Bitcoin is still a big portion of the reward that you're getting, but it's getting closer and closer. And some days when there's huge volume of transactions and things like that, and people are willing to pay, a big transaction fee to get their transaction process faster, there is a portion of that block that could be, 1 Bitcoin or so. So that's where the two parts of the reward come from. Some of it coming from treasury, some of it coming from all the transactions that are happening on the block. And once all the Bitcoin's been mined, we're going to be relying on the transaction fees to stay afloat as miners.
Okay, so these miners are all over the world, and when a transaction is initiated by somebody sending Bitcoin from one address to another address, these miners are taking those orders as they come in, effectively checking them that the person sending the Bitcoin actually has the Bitcoin to send and says, yep, that money's in the bank account and we're going to move it over to that one over there. And to do that, that Bitcoin miner has to have invested into physical computers and has to be connected to an energy source and paying an electricity bill. And therefore, that's why people pay a small amount of the transaction, but instead of paying to banks, it's getting paid to people like you that run Bitcoin mining companies, or sometimes individuals and sometimes big corporations that are securing this network and verifying this network. And it's a decentralized infrastructure as opposed to a centralized banking infrastructure, which obviously comes with lots of advantages. Is that kind of...
Yeah, like that word decentralized that you mentioned, Bitcoin was kind of like the founding technology, the way that the blockchain works and these miners verifying the transactions. Someone from Russia, from China, from Ethiopia, from Japan, anyone can get a Bitcoin miner and contribute to this network and keep it processing. So yeah, it's exactly right. It's this decentralized network. The miners have a few roles. Like one of them is to process the transactions. One of them is to keep the security in check. So if my miner does solve the transaction or solve the block, all the other miners have to go, yep, you've solved that correctly. And then it pays out. So it keeps everyone in check. It's quite complex to get into exactly how that's happening. It's like cryptography. Technically, the miner is just like trying to guess what the cryptographic puzzle is. And then when it submits it correct, it goes, yep, I've got it. And everyone else verifies it. And then you get paid out your block reward. But mining pools is something that we'll probably tap into for your audience, because a lot of people kind of go, yeah, well, like it'd be like winning a lottery ticket. There's so many miners out there. Like, what are the chances of me getting it? But what happens is, I might own one miner, I might own 1,000 miners. I'm putting all of those miners into a mining pool, collaborating with thousands of other miners. And that way we're going to get a certain number of blocks every day. Like we know on average how many blocks we get, and that's where you get a consistent reward. So that's kind of how it all it works. That's the nuts and bolts behind it.
So I just want to pause on this, because it's rare to actually have a Bitcoin miner on the show and we can get to talk about this technical detail, because I think one of the most underappreciated things with Bitcoin is people don't understand the genius of this as an invention, that you can buy this, Bitcoin mining machine and you can run the Bitcoin software, so to speak, that does all of this in the background. And so someone like you, as a young entrepreneur, can buy them at the hardware, put the Bitcoin code onto it, which interacts with the blockchain and does all of this cryptographic magic in the background, and secures a network of peer-to-peer transactions. So for all Australians listening to this, think of every time you go into a bank and the bank says, what do you need this money for? Or when you try and withdraw money out of your bank, for example, to buy Bitcoin, how frustrating is it when they say, we think it's a scam and we're going to put you through security protocols? Whereas with Bitcoin, you got guys like Will and thousands of other entrepreneurs and people in all different races, districts, places around the world that are operating on a programmatic monetary policy, that software. They're not operating on the whims of the banks that are pressured by their governments, depending on whether it's what their view of anything is. None of this comes into how the Bitcoin network operates. It is just peer-to-peer. It's math. If that person has the balance and that person's sending it, and the A and B equal C, then it's approved. you know?
Yeah.
Which
It was
is
like
really powerful.
It was a massive thing for Cal and I. If I wind back, it was probably around 2020, 2021. We really started scaling our mining operations overseas. And at the time, we still were paying the companies that had the facility set up. We'd still pay our power bills in bank transfer. And it was a Thursday night, and we had to pay a power bill, but it was a public holiday the next day. And it's about $1 million per month we pay in power bills, sometimes more. And we've gone to process the transaction, and the bank's flagged it. And then, because it's a public holiday, it won't be until Monday. And we're like, this is just nuts. Like, it's our money. Like, why can I not transfer a digital ledger overseas at any point in time? And ever since we've moved over to paying all of our power bills in USDT, it doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm sending $50 million, I can do it in a heartbeat. And that's, really the power of this decentralized network and cryptocurrency in general. So yeah, that's kind of like, I remember that as a big light bulb moment for me, that I kind of fell in love with it. And if
people listening, if the penny hasn't dropped for you about the future of money and why Bitcoin and stable coins like USDT have exploded, what Will just said is why. Because I had the same experience. I recently bought a car in Cyprus, and I paid for it using other rails, and like, the banking system is so grossly inefficient, it's absurd that it still goes. So just on that business side of things, Will, so how do you set something like that up? So you've got like these servers sitting in, like, is it in your own space over there, or how do you actually set that up? Like, that sounds kind of interesting, setting up a mining company like that in Ethiopia, for example. So do you partner with a larger provider, or have you guys lease space, or how does all that work?
So there's a lot of infrastructure behind mining. First, you've got a big, either shipping container is one style that we'll use, or you have a massive warehouse. So we will go to companies that have these big facilities set up, and we'll lease space. Usually we'll put our own shipping container on that space, and then we pay their power rate, and whatever we use at the end of the month is what we pay them. So how our clients get access to that, if it's a really big client, recently we had a client order $4.5 million of miners. We'll buy out the containers, we'll set everything up, we'll buy the miners, it'll all arrive. And then for the client, it's super passive. Like, we literally just send them a power bill at the end of every month, and they keep all the Bitcoin that's mined. For more of like a retail investor that's, just dipping their toes into it, they just want one miner. We purchase anywhere between 200 to 500 miners per month. We have them shipped to our facility. And so when someone purchases one, they'll be a part of that fleet of miners that goes there. Once it goes online, we get them all set up with setting up their mining pool, which is where we connect their miner to. And basically every single day they'll see Bitcoin, accumulating in their mining pool. And then they can nominate wherever they want that Bitcoin to go to. If they want it sent to an exchange, an anonymous wallet, whatever they want to do, they can really manage that Bitcoin how they like.
What's interesting about this, Will, and maybe you can speak to it if you're comfortable, but this is virgin Bitcoin, right? This is Bitcoin that's coming straight from the treasury, or the software, right? Because there is, no treasury, so to speak. There's no human beings here, but it's coming from the algorithm for the first time. It hasn't been through other hands. What does that mean in terms of privacy that some clients might be interested in?
For sure. There's two ways of looking at it. I'll go back early days Bitcoin, when the average person just thought, oh, it's nefarious, it's used for drug dealing, whatever it is. Yeah. There was this premium on, and there still is this premium on virgin Bitcoin because it's never been touched or has any bad trace to it. So that's one side of like the virgin Bitcoin. The other side, I won't use the example as what a lot of people would be thinking, like tax purposes or whatever, but I will use the example of think about we're pretty well off. There's a lot wrong with Australia, but in general sense, I can trust that my money in the bank's going to be there tomorrow. There's a lot of guarantees and things like that. Okay. In countries that are maybe more third world or just can't even access the banking system, for them, it's incredibly powerful that no one can come to your Bitcoin wallet and say, you've done X, Y, Z, we're seizing your assets, and then you just lost control of your assets, okay? So I could have $1 billion of Bitcoin and the government think I've done something. They can't seize that. I have to be the one that transacts on that. So who knows what's going to happen? The world is a crazy place. You may get fed up with your country and you want to leave, whatever it is. You're in pure control of that asset. And try go on a plane with $1 billion worth of gold or $1 million worth of gold or $500,000 worth of gold and take that over or cash. Whereas you could take any amount of Bitcoin on your hard wallet, cold storage wallet on a plane at any point in time. So yeah, it's an incredibly powerful thing. The anonymous side behind it, you nominate that wallet or you don't nominate it, that's totally up to you. But I just don't see any better asset that I feel comfortable holding and in control of.
Guys, I just want to apologize if you're getting any staggering or stuttering here. I'm in a typhoon on Boracay Island in the Philippines doing this, and I'm seeing sort of some stuttering and pausing. I don't know if this is going to be passed through to the recording or not, but if it is, just bear with us. That's why. My internet's been on and off all day here.
It's really clean for me.
Oh, it's clean. Yeah. Okay, good. So, Will, that point is very valid. I actually just came back from an event in Kuala Lumpur, and they put me on stage on a panel with 3 gold bugs. One sold gold as a business and one stored gold as a business. And they were singing the praises of Bitcoin. Singing the praises of gold. And they were saying, we in an apocalypse, we can take our gold chain and our gold Rolex and go and cash it in. I'm like, in an apocalypse, you think it's a great idea to be walking around with this? But I asked them the question, and I said, let me ask you something. If I've got gold in your vault, and the government deems that I'm a naughty boy because I spoke out against the mandates or I spoke out against the e-safety commission laws coming into Australia, and they say, you can't say those things. If they want to seize my gold by pressuring you, because I assume, do I have to KYC with you to put my gold in? They're like, yes. Okay, so if they came to you and said, don't let that guy take any gold out of your vaults, would you submit? And they said, we'd have to submit because they operate within the jurisdiction of that government.
Yes,
and so I said, and that's the difference with Bitcoin, is that they can't take it. If you properly self-custody your Bitcoin, you retain the power. And I've had it even when I lived in the US for 5 years, and the IRS are no joke. One time they thought that my accountant had made a mistake. It was about $4,000 of tax that was supposed to be submitted from my employees' wages that didn't get submitted because of an accounting error, nothing to do with me. And I got a letter at the top and it said, warning, intent to seize all assets and bank accounts. And it said, if I don't pay within 24 hours, they will seize all my bank accounts. And I asked my American friends, they said, oh, you're lucky you got the letter. Normally they just go into your bank account and take what they think is theirs. Because you are operating within the jurisdiction. That's why having Bitcoin on exchanges where the companies operate in a jurisdiction under a government or a bank that operates within a jurisdiction at the good graces of the government. That's why you're never really free until you actually have cold stored Bitcoin, which is what Will's saying. So it's super interesting, Will, and I couldn't agree more. So you're basically in the business of helping people secure Bitcoin, directly from the source, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, like when you go into like self-managed super fund side, that's the only time you have to nominate the wallet, and so be it. But yeah, it's like such a powerful thing to personally, pay your taxes, do everything, whatever, but be the final say of your own custody of your assets. And we're very lucky, to be in this generation that it's come out. As you say, like that thought of just the IRS being like, oh, we're just going to take everything or pause everything, or, you aren't meant to be innocent until be proven guilty. So yeah, that's where my passion for it comes. And a lot of our clients are in that same position.
Yeah, me too. Especially in the world we're moving into, where I just got back from the London rallies with Tommy Robinson, and just the ability to speak freely about what's important to you. The first place that they're going to go if they don't like what you're saying is for your money, because money affects every decision from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. It's money. And at the end of the day, money is what creates freedom or not. If you've got it, you've got options. If you don't, you don't. And governments know this. And that's before we even get into sort of what they do with fiat money, and debase it and so on. So, Will, let's get into the numbers a little bit more. So I'm sitting here, I'm an investor, and, I know that the hardcore Bitcoiners, some of them are going, oh, it's not an investment. Let's talk money though, brass tacks for a minute, because most people, when they come to Bitcoin, they come for the money, they stay for the revolution, but they come for the money initially. So I'm sitting here, I've got, $100,000. I could go and buy half a Bitcoin, or I could go and buy $100,000 worth of miners. How does that look side by side from when I go and buy the miners, and then each month I've got to pay my electricity bill, and I start accumulating Bitcoin? Let's have a look at it side by side to see what it bears out as an investment case and why people buy miners.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mentioned to yourself, I've got some charts to show you with pure data. We've actually collected, what it does look like. And it's probably one of the first questions that our bigger clients ask us. They always say, well, am I better off just mining Bitcoin, or should I just buy it today? So for the example you said, it's probably better we look at a 10 miner purchase, which is pretty close to 90,000 Australian dollars to get 10 miners. And the thing that you want to consider is, when do you start this operation? Okay. So you may start it at the lowest point Bitcoin's price was at that year. And a lot of people would say, well, you'd be better off buying Bitcoin, down at the lowest point, as opposed to at the very top point. If you bought that Bitcoin, it might be a bit of a different story. Imagine that this price we're at right now, 100K Bitcoin is actually the top of the market, and you go put in $100,000, and then over the next 6 months, 12 months, Bitcoin actually starts dumping to 90, 80, 70, 50,000, you're going to feel pretty sick, right? You've gone all in at the top of the market. So that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin mining, is it does get a pure dollar cost average strategy going. So in this model that we share, it shows both at the year low price, the mid price, and or at the all-time high price of 2020. And the reason why we're looking at 2020 is because a Bitcoin miner will last around 5 years. Okay, so 4 to 5 years. So when I put this model together, I wanted to have something that the miner's been, getting the Bitcoin coming in every single day for the 5 years. And we've just decommissioned this model of miner. So it's actually like a pure backdated strategy off real data. So if you look at it here, obviously the blue line, this would be mining. So you'd start at a negative because you've put your money into the mining machines and you haven't got any Bitcoin mined just yet. And the red line, you would start, as a positive for being able to buy that much Bitcoin at the time. The end result after mining for 5 years, you can kind of see what happens. And this is if you literally bought the all-time low in 2020 instead of buying an S19 miner, okay? At the end, Bitcoin mining still outperformed it by quite a substantial amount. Okay, so you can see here 965,000 compared to the lump sum, which is at 816. Now, a thing that happens with Bitcoin mining is at the end of every month, you need to pay a power bill to keep those miners online. And so this model does actually include that. In the red line, it includes DCAing the equivalent amount of a power bill into buying more Bitcoin at the end of that month. So the data's here. That's starting at the all-time low price with 10 miners. So the best case scenario for buying Bitcoin versus mining it. Now let's go and look at if you got it wrong.
Can I just go just before we move on to if you got it wrong and you bought the mid or the high price? I understand that. So for the people listening on Spotify, we've got a chart here that's got a blue line and a red line that's showing us over time. So I just want to be clear on that. So you've gone in and you spent $100,000 or $90,000, let's say $100,000 on mining machines that start mining Bitcoin, but then you've got to pay an electricity bill that comes from you guys every month. Yep. Where does the money come from for that electricity bill?
So you would factor that in. That comes out of your pocket. So you put 90,000 into the Bitcoin miners every single month. One miner would be about 360, so it'd be about $3,600 at the end of every month. That's in Australian dollars. And so
you pay?
Yes, correct. Exactly right. And so instead for the Bitcoin purchase option, which is the red line, instead of paying us that, you'd be buying Bitcoin with it. Okay. So that's how this model works. And then when it comes to the very end of it, we're comparing what would your total value be. So you've kept all of the Bitcoin that you've mined. Of course, you've at the end of every month with the mining side, you've gone down the power bill cost that's coming out of your pocket. And then what does it look like in 5 years' time?
So I just want, sorry, I must be a bit slow on this because I just want to be clear. So
no, it's good.
Month one, I've given you the money to buy the things. And then at the end, there's a credit into my Bitcoin wallet for Bitcoin that's been mined. And I'm just retaining.
So with let's explain the purchase strategy, yeah? Purchase strategy is you've put $90,000 into Bitcoin, and then at the end of every month, you're buying $3,600 worth of Bitcoin, okay? So you're dollar cost averaging throughout the 5 years. So lump sum at the start, and then the equivalent of what the power bill on the mining side would be, you're dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin at the end of every month. Does that make sense?
Sorry, I must have missed something. I'm thinking that I'm giving you $90,000 for the machines.
Oh yeah, so that's the mining side. So the mining side is $90,000 for the machines, and then paying us our power bill $3,600 at the end of every month. Okay, and then compare that to the Bitcoin purchase side, which is buying $90,000 worth of Bitcoin directly, and then putting $3,600 into buying Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the comparison. So it's 90 grand goes to you guys for machines, and then $3,600 a month power bills, versus $90,000 of Bitcoin, and then $3,600 a month in Bitcoin acquisition. Okay, so that's what you're committing. You're just comparing those two things side to side. Okay,
spot on. All right, and then the question that people always ask is, oh well, but when does this start? Like, what if I bought Bitcoin at the very low price? And so the first option that we show here is at the very low price. So that's like the best case scenario starting point for favoring the Bitcoin buyer, not the Bitcoin miner. Then we go and look at the midterm price, and it's relatively similar. It's not too much different, but where it really blows out is, someone that accidentally buys the top, and there's a vast difference, so the miner ends up with around 700,000, whereas the lump sum purchaser only ends up with about 400,000 or 420,000.
Okay. And does this factor the cost of energy cost growth in as well?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, so for the mining side, you've got that $90,000, and then at the end of every month in this model, you're going down the cost that you're paying power. So this is looking at your total portfolio value, and at the end of every month, it's going down by the power bill, so it's adding.
But what I mean is that doesn't power would have gone up substantially in price as an input cost during that time as well, right?
It does factor that in. We've actually been really lucky with our power, so we haven't changed in 4 years. It's stayed at about the 8 cents per US. So we haven't had increases. So like in Australia, you're paying like 30-40 cents per kilowatt hours in Australian dollars. Over in Ethiopia, we're getting it like for 13 cents per kilowatt hour.
And you haven't had because I know in Australia, power prices have gone up massively in 5 years, but in Ethiopia, it's been stable, is what you're saying.
That's another question as to why Australia's power bill has gone up so much, because our government doesn't know what they're doing. But Yes, yeah. So it does factor in this is based off our facilities. So any power increase that we did have, it's only gone up by about 0.5%, and it does.
So, and this is retrospective, what we're looking at here. This isn't a model projecting. This is actually retrospective back-tested data that we're looking at. Exactly. Okay, so let me just recap for the listener. And guys, I might be the dumbest one in the room here because I'm not a Bitcoin miner. It's the first time I've actually spoken in depth to one. But I just want to be the dummy in the room because I'm quite happy to be. So what you're saying is, and for those of you listening going, what the hell, I can't afford $3,600 a month in power bill, reinvestment or into Bitcoin. We'll just divide it by 10. So you could just buy one miner and pay $360 a month that you're DCAing either into Bitcoin, or you buy a miner and put $360 into power bills, or you could put, the money into Bitcoin directly and buy 360. So that's the comparison. And so what you're saying here is that if you timed it at the worst possible time for being a miner, you still come out in front. How much in front were they? What were the three just in recapping?
So in terms of the timing aspect of it, so timing it at the top of the market in 2020, that would be the worst outcome for the Bitcoin purchaser, the person buying Bitcoin directly, because you bought at the top of the market and then it's just going down, right? That lump sum that you bought in. So that's where the miner really outperforms. But even, if we're looking at it at timing at the very bottom of the market, you're the absolute genius in the room that gets the bottom of the market, which no one does, Adam. Like no one buys it. And everything at the bottom, still the miner outperforms, okay? And with that DCA strategy of still putting that 3,600 at the end of every month. So that's the model. When you look at it simply, you're just looking at that end result. But the benefits of mining still outweigh because it's fully passive, right? Like you don't have to be the person, like a lot of people say, yeah, I'll just DCA at the end of every month, and then they don't do it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or they look at the price and they get paralysis by analysis and they go, oh, it's pretty high. Like, I don't think I'm going to buy it at this price. And then it goes up even higher and then they miss out, So it's fully passive. It's a pure DCA strategy and it's incredibly scalable. We've got clients, like I just said before, that's bought $4.5 million worth of miners. If you try to upload $4.5 million to a exchange in Australia, no, maybe 10K a month, you know what I mean? So you can really scale into this as well. It's a massive benefit.
Is there any like tax advantages of like running a Bitcoin mining, as opposed to just buying Bitcoin as well?
So that's the final punch. Down the bottom of the chart, you can see there that with the end result of mining, you've spent you would have had a 41,000 tax benefit at paying at 30% what a company does, right? So 30% of your total expenses of like buying the hardware of the mining, the 90,000 at the start, plus the 3,600 at the end of every month. And 30% of that value is a $41,000 tax benefit on top of coming out at, winning at, around 700,000 compared to 421,000 end result. Okay. So yes, you're correct. The miners that you buy, they're an expense. You depreciate them. The power bills you're paying, they're an expense. They come off your taxable income as well.
Holy shit, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So in those three scenarios, what was it just on a percentage basis? If you were to bottom line it for me, if you did it at the worst time, how much better off as a percentage basis 5 years later are you? Do you need the slide back up? You want me to try it up again?
No, it's all, I've got it here. So you've actually got that at the bottom of it. So I'll go to it's 18% better off plus the $44,000 tax benefit for the buying at the bottom of the market comparison, which would be the worst case scenario for the miner. Well, not necessarily worst case scenario, but best case scenario for the buyer. Okay.
Yes.
Then in the midpoint, you end up at about 11% plus a $44,000 tax benefit difference. And then the final one, 61% plus the $41,000 tax benefit. So,
wow.
And look, I honestly don't want to come across as I'm a Bitcoin miner maxi, Adam. Like there is a time and a place to be buying Bitcoin. And not mining it, right? There are times that I go, you know what? There's better value in me just buying Bitcoin at this point in time. But do both is how I've had success. And an example that I often use was, I remember specifically where I was at the recent low for Bitcoin. It was at 17,000. We were in Miami at the time. And I said to my business partner, Cal, I was like, we had 100,000 US sitting there. And in our exchange, I was like, let's buy Bitcoin here. And he's like, yeah, it's still, I don't know. Like, I reckon it still could go lower. And we didn't end up doing it. And at the same time, our Bitcoin miners were just sitting in the background, just mining Bitcoin at 17, like whatever price it was.
Interesting.
That was a real big moment for me. Like fast forwarding today and how much Bitcoin I accumulated during that bear market, that I look back on and go, yeah, wow. Like, the paralysis by analysis, that decision, the emotional side that everyone thinks, oh yeah, I'll just buy at the bottom of the market, and they never do. The Bitcoin miners just do that for you.
I remember listening to Plan B in the depths of that bear market, and I think it was at about 18 or 19,000, and he was pointing to his charts, as he always does, and he said, now's probably the best opportunity you're going to get in history to buy Bitcoin at this prices, but people won't, because, well, that's people.
It's a classic.
So the mining takes that, and I can see why, like, family offices particularly, and super funds and things like that, I think mining is really appealing to them, because they're like, look, it's a long-term thing. We just want to go through. What are the counterparty risks in Bitcoin mining? Like, I'm thinking about, like, what happens if, there's a war in Ethiopia and the Bitcoin miners get set on fire, or like, there is some counterparty risks, and what are they, and what insurances or steps can you take to mitigate them, as opposed to just buying Bitcoin, putting it in cold storage? You got no counterparty risk except your own stupidity.
Yeah, for sure. So you're right. It is a piece of hardware. It's a physical thing. There is the risk of something happening at that facility, right? But that's why we've got so many facilities set up. We're not just all in on one. A client that comes to us, and I've mentioned the guy that bought $4.5 million of miners, they're not just all at Ethiopia, right? They'll be spread out. Okay. So that's kind of similar example for a Bitcoin holder. Like, I don't recommend you put all of your Bitcoin on one cold storage wallet. Yeah. Spread it out. Maybe if $100,000 is a lot to you, when you've got 100 grand worth of Bitcoin on one cold storage wallet, let's set up the next one and spread the risk. Okay. So yes, there's always risk in every investment. That is one of them. The other one, and it's less of a risk now than when we first started mining Bitcoin, but it's like the technology advancement. Okay. So the miners that we have, 230 terahash miners. So that's like the output of how much Bitcoin they're going to get back. And when Bitcoin first started, and like we were getting into it heavy, you're buying these like 10 terahash miners. But then 6 months later, a 40 terahash miner was coming out. And then, you know what I mean? And like, you're just getting out competed. But that's really slowed down now. Maybe in a year's time, we might see it to 50 terahash for the equivalent power draw. Okay. So the advancement is really slowing down. Like, chips are really at their peak. Like, they always say, oh, what if quantum computing comes out? And I kind of go, the least of your problems are going to be your Bitcoin when that happens. Like, your bank's going to be getting hacked. Like, okay. What if an asteroid hits the world? You know what I mean? So but I guess that's more of a concern for Bitcoin in general, not even just the Bitcoin mining side. But those two things would probably be, your bigger risk per se. It is an asset, it is protected. How do we counter that? We have multiple facilities. We have very high security. Like, you would not want to step a foot on the facility. You'd be shot, just plain and simple. So there's very high security on these facilities. And we do an incredible amount of due diligence in the facilities that we choose. Often governments are involved. It's as best as you can get it. Insurance side, the miner that you actually purchase comes with a 12-month warranty. We've never had a miner rock up and it just like doesn't turn on and we have to send it back. But over the 12 months, it is a computer, maybe a fan breaks, maybe a hashboard needs to be fixed. Usually it's about $300 to fix a hashboard if it does need to be fixed. But in that 12 months, you have a warranty, and we've got repair facilities on our site. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's probably the other thing. You want the machine running 100% of the time. A lot of people like go, oh, okay, I'll buy a miner because I've got free solar energy during the day, and then I just won't run it at night. It's like, no, that doesn't work. Like, you need this thing running as 100% as possible, because over that 5 years, it's going to get out competed. So you always want it running. So those are the main risks. I like being fully transparent with it, and it's why I say you don't have to go all in on the Bitcoin mining. Do some of the purchasing of the Bitcoin, do some altcoin investing, do some DeFi. I do all of that, and I help my clients do all of that. But the mining side is where I've generated the substantial portion of my wealth.
Yeah. What I want to ask you, a bit of a left field question, seeing as we've got a Bitcoin miner with us. When I was in Kuala Lumpur, I had a guy try to sound smart and come up to me and say, what about a 51% brute force attack? I don't trust these miners. Just to put that claim that, you could take over 51% of the mining hash rate of the Bitcoin network. How much do you reckon is invested in hardware and power consumption just separately, just on the miners that you've sold over the years? Like, how much, you, and then how big are you relative to like the huge miners like Mara and companies like that? Like, how much investment are we talking here into having 51% of the mining power to actually, to have a crack at that? And then when you do, if you were able to do it, you can't steal it. You can just censor transactions, and you'd ruin the thing that you hijacked.
Yeah.
But just try and put in perspective for people how much money they would need and how much risk they'd be taking on to try and do a 51% hack.
Trillions. Like, you got to ask, why would someone want to accumulate 51% of the mining power? If they did, you would think it's for some financial benefit, so they can control the Bitcoin network, and then they can send out money from people's wallets or whatever it is. You know what I mean? If that happens, Bitcoin has no purpose anymore, right? So it doesn't make financial sense to do it. And to get 51%, every miner that you're buying or accumulating to do that is adding more hash rate to the network. So it gets exponentially harder to do that. And that's why it's such a secure infrastructure, or such a secure design. It's beautifully designed in that sense that it's not an easy thing to do, and there's trillions of dollars behind it. Quantum computing, again, if you got a quantum computer, maybe you could speed that up and you could get 20, 30, 40% of the hash rate. But I don't think if you got some $1 trillion quantum computer, you're going to be putting it into trying to 51% attack the Bitcoin network. So it was an interesting thing back in the day when I first started mining 2014. Okay, it was probably more possible to do. Maybe a country or a government could have done it. And that's why, fast forward to today, where it's, in my opinion, not feasible, not possible to do, why it's such a big tick on Bitcoin as a secure asset, because there is so much hash rate. Back to your question of where do we sit? We're a drop in the ocean. We've got $60 million behind us that we're contributing to the network, but it's nothing compared to how big this network is and where it's come to.
So your power bill, just for listeners to understand what we're talking about here, Will's power bill is $1 million a month, and that's nothing. So you've got to go and buy the hardware to get 51% of the network, right, to try and go after it. Then you've got to pay for the electricity to power the hardware.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, do you have any idea of what the monthly power bill would be of Bitcoin? I guess you don't know, but it's in the.
I could do the maths. Maybe we put like a pause here. I'll do the maths, and then you can pop it up.
Yeah. I mean, that might be a question for ChatGPT. But essentially, you need to invest billions or trillions of dollars into hardware. Then you need to be ready to pay the power bill. It's not like there's Nigerian hackers sitting in the back streets of Nigeria somewhere, or Ethiopia or whatever, or India, that are going to be able to hack the Bitcoin network through a brute force attack. And this is why people say, why don't I start your next Bitcoin? Well, because it'll be vulnerable when there's 5 people on the network or 10 people on the network. It's easy to do a 51% attack, but doing a 51% attack on Bitcoin today, forget about it.
Spot on. Exactly right. Like, it's why you're starting to see, the biggest investors in the world pile into it. Its security was probably the biggest downside when it first started. Like, yes, it was potentially possible. Fast forward to today, you've got this storage of value asset. It's easy to transport anywhere around the world in the click of a finger. And it's incredibly secure. It's decentralized. Like, oh, it's it's an amazing thing. Like, it really is.
And from your point of view, like I interviewed Prince Philip and of Serbia, and I asked him, when did it click for you that Bitcoin was something special? And he said, when China banned Bitcoin mining, at the time it was 40% of the hash rate, I think, was coming out of China. And he said all that happened was those miners unplugged their machines, moved to another jurisdiction, and Bitcoin didn't miss a beat. And he said, imagine if you were operating a monetary system within a country where 40% of the system relied on one location in the global financial network. The whole global financial infrastructure would collapse. But with Bitcoin, it didn't, because it's decentralized, because there was no, and the government can't assert its pressure on a global network of miners. It can assert its pressure on its banks, but it can't assert its pressure globally on everyone, because there's always going to be a place that wants people to come in and spend money and create jobs and pay power bills.
Spot on. Yeah. And we were a part of that. We had miners in China at the time. We had to ship them over. It took 1 or 2 months for them to land there, and we're back online, So, but as, like, even say the biggest countries that are mining Bitcoin, if they all collaborate together and shut down, I can jump on, if a lot of hash rate comes off the network, your average Joe can jump on their desktop computer and contribute to it, because it's profitable to do. So it's super interesting, how it works. And back in the day when we first started our business, like, me and Cal were making Bitcoin miners by hand. Like, it was literally, a CPU with 8 graphics cards connected into it, called GPU miners. If all of the ASICs started turning off, then all these computers around the world could start mining Bitcoin, because it's profitable for them to do it again. So it's a really decentralized network. It's accessible to anyone that has a computer and power, and it's only scaling out more.
And I want people to understand that this is the only proof of work network in the world where real energy, real investment and infrastructure is required to run the network. And people say it has no value. Say, man, no, it does. It's consuming and investing billions and trillions of dollars over time. And again, it's just why you want to go down the rabbit hole, and people don't understand what is securing the Bitcoin network and why it has such amazing value, that we have this global distributed network without an intermediary, allowing people to transact peer-to-peer without the time delays, the cost. And that was the other thing when I said to the gold miners, I said, the gold storage guy, like, if I want to get $10 million of my gold out of your vault and give it to my mate Tony over here from the Bitcoin Way, who's sitting at the third table back, what's involved in that? Yeah. I was like, well, you'd have to, first of all,
a few months.
Like you wouldn't store it in the country that you're in for a number of reasons. And you'd come to our thing, you'd fill out, and then you have to, and it turns out to be tens of thousands of dollars and weeks of time and huge insurance costs and logistics and transport costs. And then I said, I'm paying you for all of the guards, the leasing on these warehouses, the insurance. You're taking a fee every month, which is linked to the value of the amount of gold. So the richer I am, you just get, what do you charge? Same as a Perth Mint, 1% per year. So if I've got $100 million, I'm paying you $1 million a year to store my gold. Whereas with Bitcoin, I can have $100 million on a USB stick up my bum and pay nobody. And if I want to send it to Tony, I can have it there and verified in 10 minutes without us leaving this room. Yeah. And people are like, oh yeah, but gold's better. And I'm like, dude, wake up.
The only downside I see of Bitcoin is it is still volatile. Yeah. So, I think I've listened to a bit of your podcast, Adam, and I understand that you're pretty heavy in Bitcoin now, and you do have to plan a little bit around that to a degree. Like, okay, next year we're going to a bear market, maybe I don't want to spend as much of my Bitcoin, to get by in those times. Right. But when you average that out over 4, 5, 10 years, it's like, I don't care. Like, you start to not care about the volatility. So it's probably the only downside I say. It's like someone getting into it for the first time. Like, if you did have $10 million of your wealth in gold and you were going to sell it all into Bitcoin, okay, maybe you got to experience a bit of that volatility at the start. But outside of that, you know, it's a no-brainer, and you should
The
at least have
volatility.
some exposure.
Yeah, and I think the volatility is coming out of it pretty quickly now. Like, I think in the last couple of years, we've seen such extraordinary, and like, I know I'm so aware of these words as I say them. This time is a little different. And you know, like, those are famous last words, but I really do believe that's true. And one case study I point to is the person who recently sold $9 billion of Bitcoin on a Friday morning, and then yeah, I mean, it dropped 2-3%. No, not even that. It dropped from 116 to 112 or something, 113, and then it closed up for the day. Right,
Yeah.
like last cycle, that would have put us into a bear market for 2 years. This time, didn't even flinch hardly, and that's because of institutional adoption. And when I was in Kuala Lumpur last week, I sat with the former trade minister under the Boris Johnson government in the UK. He was head of finance for the government, and now he's an investment banker in London. And he said the biggest miss in the history of London finance, and we are the epicenter of finance in the world. We taught the Yanks about capitalism. He said the biggest miss in history was Bitcoin, and we're just starting on the journey now of institutions. He says we can't believe Main Street front runners. It never happens. So I think we're so early. So it's very interesting. And yeah, Will, you've added, mate, you've added so much perspective here. How do people reach out? We've got a link actually below, haven't we, in the video? If you're interested in talking to Will or one of his teams about maybe buying some miners and starting your mining journey. I know Matt Fraser, who we've had on the pod, and I've been on his pod, and you've been on his pod. He bought some miners off you, and he loves it and swears by it. If you want to start that journey, guys, and learn more about it, use the link below and talk to the guys, and Will can get you set up mining virgin Bitcoin straight into a wallet of your choosing, getting some tax benefits on the way, and you know, have some exposure to Bitcoin that way. So yeah, Will, thank you so much. Anything you want to add at the end here?
I think just finish on just what we're like to deal with. And, you know, we're super big on education. You know, when someone does book in a call and starts talking to one of our experts, we really like our investors to know exactly how this works. And really that comes with time in the market or time mining. So often we'll start you off on one miner. We'll get it online for you. We'll connect it to your pool. You'll see the Bitcoin start coming out. And then you're going to start to get these light bulb moments, you know, those tax benefits. It's completely passive. You're getting a pure dollar cost average strategy. And once you get that, this is for me, you come to us and say, yep, I want to add another 10. I want to add another 20. So there's no harm in booking in that call. We've helped so many Australians, internationals get into this. You know, don't be that person that just sees online, or it's not profitable anymore. Like, I've done incredibly well. I've set my whole life up through Bitcoin mining, and you can as well. So yeah, happy to help anyone out. Adam, I really appreciated coming on the show. It's a great show that you're running. I love what you're doing and helping people out. So yeah, lovely to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Well, you're a legend, mate. I hope we see your voice on more stages around the Aussie and international scene. There's so much need for, I think, this kind of discussion, like real nuts and bolts about this aspect of Bitcoin, because it's everybody else is, you know, price predictions and what's happening in, you know, money printing land and debt levels. But this is a whole nother vector of the Bitcoin narrative, which is the genius of the Bitcoin network and why it's sound, and all the benefits that come with decentralized bank tellers that are auditing transactions on a government-free rails, which is really quite interesting. And it's a whole area that you could spend, you know, a few months just digging into the mining world and learning. And I hope you guys crush it. I know there's some great Bitcoin mining stories coming out of Australia. Smart young entrepreneurs like you, they're killing it. So, Will, thanks for coming, mate. Appreciate you. And let's get you back on in the show in the not too distant future and have a chat about some other vectors in the Bitcoin world.
Love it, Adam. Lovely. See ya. Thanks for having me.
Bye. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.